So welcome to our short review of the Ultimate Clinical Research Toolbox. Of course, everyone will be on mute while we're doing the presentation. And then once the presentation is done, we're going to go into the Q&A. So for the agenda, it's really short. I just want to talk about, I'll speak a little bit about who I am and why I'm really excited about the conduct of clinical trials on the African continent right now. I'm going to talk about a little bit about the clinical research industry, and then we're going to dive into the Ultimate Clinical Research Toolbox, and I'm going to do a demo, and again, we're going to go into the Q&A session. So my name is Tengu Muna. I have been in the clinical trials industry for about 16 years, and now work as a global trials management consultant. And I'm also a thought leader for clinical trials management in emerging markets. And that would be Africa, South America, and many countries in Asia. And I have worked for small and large sponsors across various therapeutic areas. I dare not count them. I'm sure at this point there are over 30. But my primary responsibility, besides ensuring that we meet our timelines and deliverables, what I've been doing is helping clinical research sites, particularly those that are for the key opinion leaders. And these are our elite principal investigators that work on clinical trials, implementing procedures and processes that they can use to make sure that their site is successful. In addition to that, I've also run several global audits and really helped clinical research sites to adopt best practices that can allow them, again, to be at their best. I have also worked a lot with digital marketing, because many of the clinical trials, what I just found was that in order to set everything up, we have to brand the trials. You know, we have to market them, not just to the clinical research sites, but to the patients as well. So I have a lot of background in that. So enough said, that's really where I am coming from. And these are just the tools that have allowed me to create this course. I'll dive into the clinical trials industry because it's very unique. What is unique about this industry is that, and what makes it so special is that the research practices in one country can be applied to any other country. So a clinical trial could be taking place in the US, the same trial could happen in Japan, the same trial could happen in South Africa, you know, in Nigeria, in Uganda, in Ghana, the exact same trial. The only difference would be that there might be different regulatory processes, whether it's to do with their Ministry of Health, that might be different. And then trickling down, the good news is that all these trials, though they're in different countries, they tend to use the same regulatory boards that have been identified by the pharmaceutical company that's running the projects. So the biggest challenge in the industry has been recruitment, okay? A clinical trial cannot occur if we don't have the right kind of patients and the right number of patients. So quality is key. You will hear over and over, you know, we have to run quality and safe clinical trials, and that really relates to the patients who are involved. So that's the first challenge. And then of course, skyrocketing costs in the developed world, right? You know, I would not even go into the details of what it costs to actually run some of these trials in the US, but it's a lot of money. And then of course, we have site shortage. So I say the clinical trial industry is a bit hidden because people know drugs come to the market, but I don't think a lot of people know the processes that bring drugs to the market. And it's interesting that we're in a highly regulated field, and yet the part that involves the clinical trial sites, whether it's the hospitals or the clinics, the way that they run clinical trials is not regulated. So you wouldn't go find a course, except maybe mine, on on how to actually set up a clinical research site. People kind of stumble into it. So there's always that need for more clinical research sites. And that's why companies have decided to go more into the emerging markets. And of course, that also has to do with staff shortage. If we don't have enough sites, we obviously do not have enough people to run these clinical trials. And for staff shortage, it's not just at a clinical trials, the industry itself is always short of people because most of us in need, we never leave. And then there is the constant need to have more people come in. So that's it. The solution that pharmaceutical companies have adopted is simple. We're just going to go to emerging markets and we're going to make sure that, you know, there are enough clinical research sites that we can use. So that is happening already. You know, there's a big push right now in South Africa. There's a little bit happening in East Africa, a little bit in West Africa, but it's not, no one is training anybody. One of the projects that I worked on in Tanzania, we just happened to speak to a certain hospital that we needed a certain population and we really had to work closely with them. So there's no real effort to say, let's train clinical researchers, let's train clinical clinical researchers, let's set up clinical trial sites, and let's have a viable industry that can really transform the way that we run clinical trials in Africa. So what is the opportunity? The thing that I found from working in all the emerging markets, particularly in Africa, that we have research naive patients, which means that if I am looking at a study subject in the US, they could be on 200 different types of medications. You guys are the medical doctors, so you would know drug on drug interaction more than I do. And so when we run trials, we are constantly, prohibiting certain con meds. We're constantly issuing waivers on, oh, this patient ended up taking this specific drug. So it could be really, it's really hard to have clean data, let me put it that way, for when we're conducting clinical trials in Western countries, particularly the US. And then of course, in the emerging markets, we don't take a lot of medications. I just take vitamins. So, I mean, I've always been that way. And I know there's so many other people who don't do that. Even the patients that we worked in Tanzania, most of them were research naive patients. They really were not on any medication. And then the low cost is huge for pharmaceutical companies. When I'm on a project, it's so amazing, the difference between a trial that is being run in the US and the same, and a trial that is being run, say, in Brazil or in South Africa, the costs are so different. I mean, it's just incredible. And because of the cost, in the past, when we work on a project, majority of the patients came from the US, but now there's a big push having more of the patients come from these emerging markets. Then, of course, the rising and expanding healthcare sector in Africa, it's huge. For various reasons, when we have a clinical trial, it benefits everybody. So a patient usually gets paid for participating in the clinical trial. They get healthcare. So when I'm conducting a trial, we have a whole department that I work with where we give patients the insurance that they need, so they have the best care during the course of the trial. And for me, what I get really emotional about is that I've worked on various trials where people didn't even know what conditions they have. And then they're on a clinical trial and all of a sudden, there are all these tests done. Some find out that they are diabetic, they have high blood pressure. So it's a win-win situation in terms of patient care. And then of course, the doctors, the amazing principal investigators, who I work with a lot, and they're just incredible people. When they're running a trial, they do get paid for it. And so I do a lot of budget negotiations and all of that, but if you want to do this just simply for the monetary value, I mean, it's just incredible. And it's a really good incentive, to the point where I have certain doctors now whose sites that I help set up who only run clinical trials. That's all what they do. They have flexibility in their schedule, they get compensated adequately, and things like that. Then let's talk about what happens when we run a clinical trial and what happens to the equipment. When the clinical trial is over, we have all this stuff. We have lab kits. We have, let's say we're doing a cardiovascular study, right? I mean, we have ECGs that get done, and then we no longer use those machines anymore. So when we run a clinical trial, at the end, I'm always juggling between, oh, what do we do with this equipment? Now we've tried to donate them, we've tried to do so many things. So in my mind, I think about the expansion that is happening right now on the African continent. We have a viable clinical trials industry with clinical researchers. When a clinical trial is over, we can just basically feed that equipment into our healthcare sector, right? Then, of course, Africa has highly educated healthcare professionals. I'm not going to go much into that, but we have highly educated people on the continent. And then the other thing is that with the growing middle class now on the African continent, there is a need for more targeted therapies that are for Africans. And let me back up a little bit. The other trend is that the FDA in the United States, which you'll find is no matter where you conduct a clinical trial, they're involved. I mean, they are like the biggest regulatory body. And when we do trials all over, we typically register them with the FDA. But they are requiring that in order to bring a medication to the market, now we want to have it in many different populations. You know, we want to make sure that we don't just test, you know, on white people. What about Black people? What about Africans? You know, I mean, we have the highest amount of you know, variety of phenotypes and genotypes, and that is well known. And so that's why there is this need really to have more clinical trials conducted abroad, particularly on the African continent. So what is the solution? Now, I'll go into the ultimate clinical research toolbox before demoing it. So I took everything that I know based on what is happening in the emerging markets, and how can someone come into this industry who has no idea about what happens and understand the workings at a clinical research site? Because everything starts on the clinical research site. So I created this course because I wanted practical hands-on training on how to set up a site and profit from it. And in addition to that, even if one is not wanting to set up a site, to have the kind of knowledge that will allow you to really excel in this industry. And then what I did was I targeted it more towards African research professionals, because like I said, that is the biggest market right now. And that is in the next 20 years or 10 to 20 years, the growth is going to be phenomenal. What makes this program really effective is that it's step by step, and it's really designed to facilitate and create profound changes in a clinical research practice. And it's not hearsay, it's based on my years of experience, research, input after being 16 years in this industry. But the other thing that I'm really excited about is that when you become part of the program, we have Q&As, we have the Facebook group. And then if you choose to work with me on a one-on-one basis, that is also another option. But we also have you join our database of clinical trial sites. And then what happens is that if there's a project that is about to start, you get informed about it. And then we also walk you through what you actually need to participate in the clinical trial. So this program will help you if you're interested in a career in clinical research, you want to have a successful clinical research site, but you're unsure on how to do it, or you want to work at a clinical research site. The other thing that I found was I've come across people who have set up a clinical research site in the past, but it's not successful. So I've worked with sites that, you know, they've had a stream of trials coming in, and then all of a sudden there are changes in the pharmaceutical companies, and you know, and then things just stop. But it's also showing you that if you have a clinical research site, I also show you the marketing steps that you can take to ensure that your trial is, your site is successful. And then, like I said, you have a site, but you don't know how to expand, because ideally when you have one site, you want to start with one and it will become profitable immediately from your first clinical research trial. And then you want to expand, really. And then, of course, if you want to really make serious changes in your life, right? That's always important. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and I'm just going to demo the Ultimate Clinical Research Toolbox. And let's go into, just let me know if you're seeing my screen once I get in there. Can everyone see my screen? Just do a, like, you know, just thumbs up or yes. Okay, great. I assume that you all can see my screen. John, can you see my screen? I know you're on mute right now. If you want, you can just do a thumbs up.
Yes, I can.
Oh, fantastic. I just wanted to make sure. And if you can, I'm sure Isaac can as well. Okay, great. So this is the ultimate clinical research toolbox, is what your dashboard will look like. We go through, it's 68 modules. So this is the foundational part of it. It's basically you go in, you study this part, and then we meet and we go over your questions. But then in addition to that, there are offline pieces that we also work on. So this is just saying, okay, this is the part that's going to take up more of your time, really understanding the industry and what exactly happens at a clinical research site. So you have good clinical practices are what we have in the clinical research industry, which are related to, quality data, safe trials, and all of that. It's really a foundational module. And then we go into your toolbox and we talk about recruitment and what happens with the staff at the clinical research side, what happens with the equipment, the facility, the types of databases that you use, and the supply. Essential documents is a lot because we talk about the specific types of documents that you have to know about in order to be in the clinical trials industry, what they are and how you actually manage them. And then we talk about a project flow, and this is huge because we go over what happens from the beginning of a clinical research project all the way to the end at closeout and what the expectations are. And then we cover the different types of site visits. So a sponsor would typically come out to your site, and there's certain things that you have to know, there's certain things that you have to do when the sponsor comes out. You could have also an audit, could have a sponsor or pharma company can audit you, the FDA can audit you. So those are just things that you want to pay attention to. Then we have a section for best practices. Okay, I now have a clinical research study. How do I manage it? What do I do on a day-to-day basis? We talk about meetings with your staff, how you manage informed consents, which informed consents are I call them the foundation for patient care in clinical trials. So we talk about that. What do you do with safety events? If an adverse event occurs or serious adverse event, we define those and what you do with them. What about protocol deviations? You're expected to conduct a protocol, but you're deviating for whatever reason. How to manage that? How do you manage your supplies? How do you negotiate the budgets and contracts, right? How do you train your staff? How do you work with the institutional review board that is over your site? And what is investigator oversight? And this is huge in clinical trials. So we discuss that. And then you get gifts. You get this section on essential documents too. Is all the documents that you need to conduct a clinical trial. It is here. That's what you get. And then of course, my favorite, which is I give you a little bit of a marketing bonus on how to market your site, but typically the best way to do that is actually work with me one-on-one, but I give some really good tips on how to market your site. And so that is what the course is about. It's really an in-depth look, and it really gives you all the tools where once you take this course, you know everything that there is to know about running clinical trials. So let's go back to my PowerPoint. Okay, that way I don't lose my flow here. Okay, perfect. So how to join? It's really simple. You can go to our website, achaiboclinical.com, and you can read some more. I mean, we do a lot. So we register sites, we do some recruitment, we do feasibility for clinical research studies, particularly in the emerging markets, because there's a lot of nuances involved. And then of course, the clinical research toolbox is on there. And if you want, you can also go straight to this website as well. And so that said, thank you for listening. I hope my presentation did not take up so much time. And now we're going to go into the Q&A portion of the call.